Hello, I'm Mr. Pibbles, but you can call me Peter. And welcome back to our Planet Coaster Challenge Park series here in Planet Coaster. Now, between the last episode and this one, I've been a little busy doing a few little mundane tasks off camera just to make things really pop. So, the first thing you'll notice is that the Peopleville karting circuit now has a nice little logo that sits above it as you enter towards it. And it's the same down here. It's on the side of the building with a bit of a logo next to it. And I have made a few small custom billboards that you race past as you go, including Le Connasse, that being clothing per femme, Fata Imana Italiana, an Italian restaurant, the Silver Fox Sanctuary that's been rescuing foxes since 1962, and JMC Leather, a company that does leather. And the idea with them is that they are supposed to be fictional in universe brands that have sponsored bits here and there. And if you've got any idea for any more sponsors that we could fit anywhere else around the park, please feel free to let me know. The other thing that we sorted last episode was this. Hypno Spinner. And yes, it was quite fun. It's our next kind of big flat ride. But speaking of flat rides, we're going to do something else in this episode. So without further ado, let's roll the time lapse. Yes, hello and welcome to the time lapse. And we have a little bit of an episode lined up for us today, and I will tell you now for free that we do get a little bit done, which is quite fun. Now we are starting off here at our Hypno Spinner, just getting some of the bass down and getting, making it feel a little bit nicer and a little bit more kind of sunk into the area with some immersive type theming, and by that I mean trees, because, who doesn't like a good tree? I feel like they always add to the area of what you're doing quite well, which is always quite fun. Putting it down here with some bushes just to add just a little bit more green. And now with what we've got at the moment, this isn't too consequential, but once we've got stuff behind it, in sort of the pit behind it, you're sort of using these bits of green to break up different areas. It's like you use buildings and you use bits of green, and I think kind of using these bits of green is going to be very beneficial for kind of these intermediary bits moving forward, which is quite fun. And you can see me here putting in a couple of rocks. I say a couple. I mean, I'm always a fan of placing rocks. You don't know if you're aware, but yeah, putting down a couple of rocks here and there just to help, again, break up the endless kind of array of distance that's behind the ride and just give it a little bit more. And you can see me here getting in our next ride, which is the Resurgence, a little bit of a drop sling launch tower. It's all quite fun. And yeah, you'll see what I do with it is just put a bit of cue in and basically play with it as it is. There's no need for it to be anything more than just a little kind of thing here to add something else to this little area. Because, we are going to have little areas within this park, and this is kind of one of these between areas that's sort of neither here nor there. And the whole idea about this one is that, it's all leading up to the raceway that we built in the previous couple of episodes. So, it follows that similar colour scheme and just ties into that area quite nicely, I think. Now you can see me here getting over these fence pieces, and I am a big fan of this fence, as you'll know in the previous episode, and it just helps to make this area feel sort of all the same as each other. You've got this area and you've got fences that are just a really nice way to kind of make sure everything feels right and kind of nice, and sort of makes everything feel like it fits with each other, which is why these fences are here, which is quite fun if I'm being honest. But yes, so a little bit about what we're looking at doing not only in this episode but moving forward is sort of finishing off the front plaza, which we will be doing both in this episode and I will be doing off camera between episodes. And then the plan is to start looking a little bit further into the park. I know we've expanded out laterally, but we haven't expanded out sort of into the park itself, and we'll actually start moving in and we'll build a couple more sort of, interesting rides. Because I know it's all fun and games, me sat here going, oh yes, here's a flat ride, here's a flat ride, here's a flat ride, here's maybe one roller coaster, but that's not really interesting for, yous at home to watch. So instead, we are gonna have a bit of a play round probably in the next episode, and we'll see what happens with what I decide to work on next, which is going to be exciting. And obviously this is all leading up to kind of building into this park more, adding a couple more kind of higher themed areas, and indeed working our way to our next roller coaster, which is fun. We're almost 10 episodes into this series, and I've only built one roller coaster and about half a dozen flat rides and a go-kart course, which, par for the course for this series. You're getting half an hour's worth of episode, a session, and I do not quite much in each of them. This is only, say, an hour's worth of content condensed down into 20 minutes. And there's only so much I can do in an hour, and I know I could chop and change bits here and there, but I actually quite like giving you sort of a little bit more of everything that I do, more of the mundane, as it were, which is quite fun. But it does mean you get parts like this where you see me meticulously trying my best to place fences for probably a good 5-10 minutes of this episode, which is always fun. But yes, getting these fences in, again, I just like how they look. They're quite nice around this area, and they tie it all together really nicely. And you'll see what I do next is I turn around and go, okay, we've got fence around the queue for the ride, and then where do we go next? Well, there's only really one way you can go with that, and that's making sure people don't get sunburn or they will complain. And we don't want complaints here. As much as, they're fun and all, we don't need them. So what we look at doing next is putting a bit of shade over this queue line, and I think what we end up with, again, I rather like it's a little bit of everything, and it's ultimately trying to get something that works for the ride, and ultimately I think what I go for works quite well, especially with these carved wooden pillars. Even though you're not really able to see the carved bit, I think they work quite well where they are. It's slightly annoying because I've got them off center onto where they need to be, so just copying and pasting them over wasn't exactly as easy as I thought it was going to be, but we move with what we have, which is always fun. But yes, you can see me here trying to find a roof to put on it, and I go up and down because I'm trying to find the veranda roof. I toy with the idea of the corrugated iron, but no, it's this veranda roof that is always going to be like one of my favourites for projects like this, where, I want a roof that's smaller than regular roofs, and I want it to be off-grid. The veranda roof is the roof for me. So here I am just putting it in, making sure there is that bit of cover over the queue, because again, I know that the guests will complain if I don't do it. So it's all kind of fun stuff, and I think what we've ended up with here does look quite nice, and it just sort of works, as it were. Getting in these kind of cross beams, making sure you can see the carved part of the carved beams, always fun. And yeah, it just looks quite nice from kind of all different angles, and it adds that much needed shade that we need. And obviously we've got these long drapes from the mythology pack, which I just thought we'd stick on the ends here, just to kind of add a little bit more to this building, almost as if it's sort of like a banner across it. And I think it just looks nice. And it works, and I did toy with these hanging baskets, but they are too big for what and where I needed them, so I was like, as much as I can scale them and trying to make them fit, there's no way I'm making them fit, so that's all fun. And kind of getting these, again, carved wooden pieces in along there, just to make it look a little bit nicer. Because ultimately that's what we need it. We need it to look nice and adorable, almost. Kind of, this is another sort of let's look at this and let's make it feel slightly nostalgic that I know I like to do in this. And actually, again, what we end up with feels a little bit like a garage or a shed at a farm, and I know that's not quite where I'm going with it, but ultimately I think it works. And you can see me now trying to get a couple of trees in around. I start off with these elms, and they're just too big and too tall, so I move down to these ash, and I think we stick with these because they're a lot smaller and they just fit a lot better around kind of the drop tower. And I like how even with the trees in, you can see it from almost any angle. You know, you sit down and you look up and you can see this thing shooting off into the sky if you're looking at it at the right time, and it's quite nice. And here I am now with some hedge. I like the box hedges in this game. They are quite adorable and they work a lot better than the hedges from the first game, so ultimately they're a win in my books, and I think they just fit wherever you need them to. So you can see me here just playing with them, getting them all the way in down along here, which, you know, I didn't know what I was doing when I started using these hedges and going, what am I doing? And then I figured it out, and actually I really like what we ended up with, which is always a good a good outcome to have, because it's just nice to kind of sink these hedges into the ground and have something that feels a little bit hedgy. And I know I'm going to play around with hedges and stuff more later into the series, but for now, kind of, I like the sort of rustic feel of them, and I like that they're not overly big here, and that, you know, it feels less like, well, it feels more like it's just placed there to be a little fence than anything. And that is ultimately what it's here for. It's here to be a little fence so people don't, you know, walk over and kind of destroy everything. But there we go. And just adding a little bit of foliage down here, kind of with these heather strips and this wild garlic, which I know I've been using sort of other things throughout this whole project here and there. And moving on to these wild garlics down here, it's just quite nice. You know, they're different to everything else. They sort of have this sort of quality that feels a lot different to everything else. And I ultimately like how it all turned out, really. And kind of, you can see me here putting a little bit more heather down the middle, and it's just a little bit of needed colour, if I'm being honest. You know, it's all good and well putting in these green, sort of massive arrowwood or bramble bushes, but putting in the little purple heather just looks nice. And I am paused now because I am about to move on to something new, and you can see me putting in some wood flooring, which means we are officially moving on to the other half of this opening plaza, which when I tell you, when I started this bit of the plaza and went, oh, this feels good, I'm happy with actually finally starting this. It was just so satisfying to get a start on it. And you can see that I'm using very much a similar architectural style as to what I did the other side with these batten pieces, and with sort of getting them in with this rustic feel. And you'll see that I use a lot of the dark blue that I did further down and all of this. But this is our souvenir shop, which is fun. I know that souvenir shops came in the most recent, not the most recent update, the one before that, and kind of they came along, and I quite like them. You know, they're different to using other sorts of shops in the, you know, you can place them down and have people actually go to things. And I know I've seen a couple of sort of hacks to do with them that I've used myself in terms of getting people to play sort of little midway style games, or like have these, you know, basketball booths that people go to and like, oh, do you want to throw a hoop and all that. But ultimately, you know, I'm using them here for their intended purpose, that is as a shop, which is good, and I like how these little shops turned out. And you can see me kind of putting all of these bits along the wall. I do wish we had more souvenirs, but I won't complain about it too much, because I think, again, what we end up with in here looks quite clean, it looks quite good, and ultimately I am happy with it. But it is just getting all of these different sorts of souvenirs in, because, you know, this is the big last souvenir place that you'd go in the park on your way out. So putting all of these things down kind of feels nice, and it feels right to have it where it is. And you can see me now going in and changing bits and pieces here and there, just to make sure that everything has what I want it to have, and to make sure that all the areas feel right. Because, you know, it doesn't feel necessarily the most realistic to have bunches of kind of, you know, there's all these different shelves and they all have the same shirts on them, but, you know, all the shirts are a different colour and all that. That doesn't necessarily feel realistic, so getting the shelves and making them feel congruent with each other was a big thing of what I wanted to do here. So it's like putting the hats in, putting these key rings and plushes and all the novelty hats and down and stuff. And I know these don't necessarily fit what I've got going for me so far, but it's that sort of thing of, you know, there's not necessarily the most amount of souvenirs in the game, and I wish, you know, they bring out more souvenirs with, you know, new DLCs that come out. You know, I would have loved some sorcery themed souvenirs to come with the sorcery pack, or even, you know, more base game souvenirs in things like, I mean, I know they exist at souvenir shops with things like hoodies, other types of hat, even like mugs, magnets, all of that, because, you know, there's only so many things you can place down and try to go, oh yeah, no, that's completely different from the thing that's next to it, even though they look exactly the same. And it's just trying to make it look nice, which is ultimately what I do here with the plush stand. And I like this little plush stand that we come out with here. It's that sort of, you know, you go to these places, they've always got plushes sitting in the centre of like an island or something like that, and ultimately it just looks nice. You know, you walk in, you grab one off the thing, you look at it, you're like, that's £40. No, maybe not today, but I'll take the smaller one. And I know we don't have any size variation on these, but yeah, and I'd love to have more types of plush, maybe more themed to the different mascots that we've got in game, because I know at the moment, again, we don't have much in the way of souvenirs, even though we've already got, you know, lots of souvenirs in here. And I'm sorting out a display here at the moment for all the posters, because I thought it would just look quite nice to get some posters in and have this little poster stand. And yeah, it just looks nice, and getting sort of an internal trim in here now. Like I know I go away and I do some stuff off camera for this, and ultimately I think you're going to like what I've done off camera, I'm going to like what I've done off camera. It's a win-win situation, if I'm being completely honest. But yeah, I was going to say don't get attached to those massive white pieces. I didn't need to say that because, you know, I got rid of them immediately. But yeah, swapping them out for this little blue trim just looks quite nice. And I know it's a lot smaller and a lot, you know, quainter than, you know, the massive white thing that was there. But I like these a little bit more, if I'm being honest. And just having them kind of sit around this building adds a little bit more to the interior than just the wall. And I know I don't necessarily need to, you know, give a toss about interiors because of the nature of the beast that is this game, but I really like doing interiors from time to time. You know, I won't do them on everything, but when I do like to give it a bit of a good crack, which is always fun. But yeah, getting that bit of Viking trim in there just to give it a little bit of variety just worked so well for what I wanted. And getting these bits in here now, kind of making this distinction between where the shop floor is and where the rest of the shop is, it just looks quite nice with where it is, and kind of getting this trim up the top of it. I don't know why it's taken me, it takes me a good while to get this trim in. It's so annoying, but when it gets in, it looks good, I think, which is fun. But yeah, you can see me here putting these in, and this has overall been quite a productive episode, if I'm being honest, and I've enjoyed it. Again, I know I do a couple of bits off camera, and by the time we're back, this building's done, but I will see you in real time in a moment. Okay, well, welcome back to real time, where today we have done a little bit of work. Obviously, we have added in this sky tower, a lovely little drop and sling tower that kind of acts as just a little bit of a flat ride, and it's the same over here. We finished off some of the theming around our lovely little hypno spinner, and I have started this here, which is our nice little souvenir shop right at the front of the park, kind of bringing this opening plaza into equilibrium, which is fun. So it might be that I do a little bit of work on this off camera, but before that, you know, I will see you in the next episode. If you've enjoyed this, please give me a like, give me a comment, possibly even a subscribe if I'm lucky enough. And, well, without further ado, roll that outro.